Hello and welcome to this piano let me try that again. Hello and welcome to today's piano pandemictivity video. And for today, I thought we might look at music of consolation. And maybe we'll do more than one of these. We'll make our way through a few different pieces. The purpose, of course, is one, to discuss pieces that have a character of consolation, of comfort, of hope in the midst of difficult times, which we are in. Two, to look at ways of connecting what's going on in these pieces with the Partimento tradition. And three, to discuss just some of the issues that arise when we play this stuff on the piano, issues of tone production and melody and pedaling and all that kind of stuff. So I've chosen Ich ruf zu dir, Herr, which is one of the chorale preludes of J.S. Bach found in the Orgelbüchlein. And in this particular arrangement, it's written out for piano by Federico Busoni, the great Italian pianist. And first of all, I have a lot of students who are organists, and I have a great love for the organ tradition. And I also have a great love for early music performance practice. And well aware that this particular arrangement violates pretty much every tenet of early music performance practice. This is very much a romanticized version of that, so I want to acknowledge that flat out, and I play it that way. I don't try to unromanticize it. If I want to hear it done in the correct original way, I'll just ask one of my friends on the organ to play it. So I am very happy playing romanticized versions of things, and I'm very happy playing correct early music, authentic urtext versions of things. Both are wonderful worlds, and I don't really set them against each other as enemies. So anyway, what's going on? This particular type of piece is known as a melody chorale, and it's arranged so that the tune is in the soprano voice, and there are no interludes. It just really is a harmonization of the tune with some kind of nice, some kind of moving figuration to give it a little bit of character and motivic energy. So there are many other types of chorales. Sometimes the tune is in super long note values that can only be understood by ents at an ent church service, if there's such a thing. Played in the pedal, in giant whole notes. Other times, anyway, there's a whole bunch of different ways that Bach and his contemporaries, such as Krebs and Buxtehude, would approach these pieces. So anyway, that means that in the soprano we always have the tune, which means we are voicing. And so, even though I may have these large chords and these leaps and so on, I have to bring out this note right here, that puppy right there. So the tune is... So rather straightforward. What's not so straightforward is making sure that I create a lot of sound on that top note like this. And then keep all this alto stuff real quiet. No matter how quietly you play this alto stuff, as long as you're playing it at all, it will be heard because it's in faster note values. What we're trying to do is keep the listener's attention on the soprano, even though it is struck only less often than other things. So what I want to not do is something like this. Notice how your attention is immediately drawn to those inner voices. So I'm going to try to separate the layers more. Now I know on video, on your phone or laptop, the ring of the soprano doesn't actually come through that well. Promise you when you're actually in the room, it sounds a little bit better. So just give me a little bit of grace on that issue. The other thing is how much can we get away with sneaky pedaling? Well, there are a couple of different things that limit how long we can change the pedal. One is simply that the harmony has changed. So in the pickup measure and the first measure, we have F minor. Beat 2, we have this beautiful harmony that resolves to here, and then it resolves back. Partimento players will immediately recognize that as the page 1. I can't pedal through. Obviously have to change for those. That's really well understood. What I can get away with occasionally is little stepwise things in subsidiary voices. Like that E natural. That's not part of the F minor harmony. But I probably could get away, depending on the piano in the room, with pedaling through that if I really wanted to. So anything that's an arpeggio of the currently existing harmony is fine. And sometimes these little neighbor and passing tones, we can get away with it. That melodic passing one, I would definitely pedal that. And then I would pedal through most of that. I would change pedal in most of that. I just don't want to hear it. Sometimes when I'm teaching, I'll do something like that, and I'll ask a student, is that a good sound or a bad sound? And they think they're supposed to answer, oh, that's a bad sound. And I say, I don't know, actually. Just hang on a second. It's kind of a cool sound, but maybe it's inappropriate for right now what we're trying to show. And what we're trying to show is this ornament, and of course, maybe a little bit of that inner voice. Now, what's the piano really good at? The piano is really good at changing the level of sound. And so we finish this first phrase. And we go to that somewhat unexpected chord, okay? It's the minor 5, and so it's going to take us away from F minor temporarily. And I like to create a little bit of a surprise subito on that, just because I sound surprised as a player if I do it like that, and it heightens the listener's awareness that this harmony is different. So here. So I'll wait just a moment and play that subito, as opposed to... See, if I play as though I'm not surprised, the listener will not know to be surprised. I have to enact that surprise performatively. I have to act out every response I want the listener to have. I have to act it out in the way that I play, and then they will know to imitate it. It's this mimetic thing that's going on. Now the other cool thing that happens here is if I take that time and do that subito, and play this a little more quietly, now everybody's attention is really on it, and I can do that that little 2-note phrase. This is going to become really important later, this 2-note phrase. Ya da 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 da. You'll see it's going to become really important. So let me do that better. What a great harmony. Again, from Partimento, we recognize this immediately as a tied bass motion. with the dissonance in the bass. Okay, so now we come around and we repeat that stanza where it says più dolce and sehr weich. This just is repeating most of the stuff. The one thing he does, he thickens out the bass a little bit. Notice this, these filled in fifths. And he even does this cool parallel octave thing, doubling that inner voice. The purpose of this kind of writing is to just create that darkness. If you listen to the beginning where it's just octaves in the left hand. And now with the filled in heavy metal bass. Now it's got that. So that takes a lot of control of the left hand just to get that darkness without too much volume. Then again, this happens really the same. Surprise. Da, da, da. Reach for this. All right. Okay, etwas heller, poco più sonoro, a little brighter, right here. A little more sonority, so because we're heading toward the major key. So yeah, turn pages here. Now, right here, we have I would try to play that all as one long phrase, maybe not take too much time. I'm trying to get everybody to hear. And again, you hear the E flat, not being drowned out by that, but that's a tough one. I can't. I might be able to reach that. Busoni is pretty merciless with his huge stretches. If you can't reach something like this, here's what you can do. You just leave out the lower octave. And you can get a clear harmony. I might be able to do it. Just barely. I may or may not try to do that in a concert. So we end up on A flat, and it's got the fermata. Now the thing about the fermata is that it's not necessarily sit here and count to 100 or something. The fermata is the end of the phrase in the original hymn. That's the purpose of these fermatas, is they showed where the phrase is, and it doesn't necessarily mean you're supposed to take all this time. And actually, I do like to use those 16th notes to sort of propel it into the next phrase, which is where the drama really gets going. So I might do something like this, starting right here. Oh, I need to turn on my notation. Yeah, starting right here. That's E flat, yeah. So I kind of had this crescendo, da, 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 and it's the crescendo to nowhere. It signals to the listener something is important, something important is about to happen. Pay attention, pay attention. But then when we actually get there, I don't have to hit it hard, because that would be, what's the word we use? Gauche. Yeah, it's just extremely tacky. So, subito, and più piano, just as Busoni says, there's more piano there. So, so again, I need to be surprised on behalf of the listener. I can't just plunk out an F major sonority as though it's the most ordinary thing in the world. This F major sonority is very surprising and interesting and beautiful if I am surprised and interested and perceive it as beautiful and play it that way. But if I don't, here's what we'll get, okay? Prepare to be crushed. See how I just drove right past that? Like a jaded, cynical tourist. So now I'm going to try to play that as though it is something important. But we're not going to stay there. So it's going to move harmonically. So let me do that whole bit starting back up here. Start over. Okay. That's a really long note in the melody, and this is where the middle voice sort of starts to increase in importance, because look what we have. Melody. Accompaniment, melody, accompaniment, melody, accompaniment, melody, accompaniment, melody, accompaniment. Take it. You're the rock star now. Da, dee, da, dee, da. Return of the tune. Da, dee, da. It's really, really beautiful. So we have to plan this to go over that amazing musical rise. So what's going on in the accompaniment is that you have this little three-note figure, tum, ta, it reaches upward and then falls down. And these are very typical Bach era figures. Sometimes, that people give them names. It's a sigh, or it's a prayer, or it's a cry for help. And of course, in the case of this piece, it's very appropriate to see it as a kind of prayer, or help, crying out from these inner voices, and they almost get more urgent as they go. Now, we do have to balance all of this, because the piano is like a dance floor. It can get too crowded if everybody's moving around and drawing attention to themselves. So once we get to hear this moment, I will voice that a lot, and then I'll kind of give it over to the accompaniment for the most of the bar. And then the melody will take it back. So we'll have the big melody, and then a little bit of this. Now notice what I'm doing with my left hand there. I'm keeping one of those bass notes. I'm finger substituting and keeping it because this bass note is very important. Okay, this is known as a tied bass motion. Again, from the Pandemictivities tradition, widely taught, well understood, and universally used in the 18th century and well into the 19th century. I mean, Schumann was doing this. Beethoven was using this. Chopin used this. It's just absolutely everywhere. And it is among, I would say it's among Bach's favorite motions. You know, you can go through his music and you hear where does a composer, when the emotional temperature is pretty high, what motions happen, you know, at the greatest, coolest moment. And you can kind of gauge with different composers the ones that they're most attached to. And I would say this is pretty high on Bach's list. Well, here it is in the coolest part of this piece, the tied bass motion. So what's happening is that the bass is off the beat, and it supports one chord where it's a dissonance, and then it falls and resolves, and then the chord moves and the bass becomes dissonant, and the chord and the bass are having this take that, no, I'll get out of the way, I'll get you, I'll get out of the way, I'll get you, and they're having this little race down the stairs. So that's what that is, and it's taught in Partimento. So that actually is the conclusion here of the original, but Busoni repeats the phrase lower and, you know, with a different texture. So he says più obscuro ma sempre cantando, more obscure but always singing. Okay, so the tune is here. And the words you can almost hear. Something like that. So we need to hear that, and then we also still have these beautiful inner voices. Major. And another tied bass motion. And it's not so easy to hear these. So I might play those with just a little bit of growl along the bottom, just so that that tone comes through right here. And again, surprised by major. So, would I consider this an easy piece? This is what we would call easy for amateurs, hard for professionals. I heard this phrase when I was a student. I was accompanying Mozart violin literature and playing for the violin professor, you know, with a fellow student. And, you know, there are not that many notes, actually, in some of those Mozart violin things. And this is the phrase he used. This piece is easy for amateurs, hard for professionals. And I immediately knew what he meant. You know, he's a good teacher. I immediately understood. It's not that hard to get all these notes. Yes, there's some reaches, but you can break those, or you break them or fake them. It's fairly slow, and people at a variety of levels really could get this under their fingers. But to get the sound, oh man, it's a lifetime of work. To get that long singing line is really a lifetime of work. So here in this wonderful piece by Bach, romanticized and made available on piano by the incomparable Busoni. We have a beautiful piece, music of consolation, and some really interesting bass motions that we can see and understand through the Partimento tradition, and some significant challenges of tone production and clarity on the piano. So I hope you enjoy getting to know this piece and checking it out. And now I'll play it all the way through for you. Hope everyone is well, isolating, being careful, staying sane, finding something to do with this time, and I hope that this music brings you consolation and joy. Okay, now I'll play it all the way through for you.